We want to welcome Courtney Scott. We're really fortunate to have Courtney Scott here. Courtney's been on the program a number of times, and she finally finished this long project. What was that? How long did that project?
7 years.
You started out, it was going to be, what, a few months, a few weeks?
Well, you know, I try not to think about the end because it was too daunting.
Yeah, it took, what, 7 years, and I remember you kept coming up with new trailers because it's done, and then you realize, well, it needs a little bit more polishing here, maybe a little audio work there, and I know you had changed your music score, I think, once or twice, and it was
Change the title.
The title. Actually, I like the other title better. but that's just, you know, it's the same documentary all the way through it. You just change the focus a little bit.
Right. It was, you know, it's like anything you work on, any project you work on, you can always fine-tune it, and I just spent a lot of time fine-tuning it. Plus, other issues would come up where I felt I needed to include them. For instance, there was a lawsuit in Los Angeles against the Los Angeles Zoo. And so pretty much that was last year, I think. I went down there and got an interview with the plaintiffs and the attorney in that case.
So you were including stuff from even as recent as a year ago.
Well, maybe it might have been 2 years. I'm going to backtrack there. I think it was 2 years ago. But anyway, that came up, and I said, no, I think that's important, so I needed to get that in. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's just, I know Jim was one of the people kept asking me, when is that film going to be done? So I'm so glad to be here tonight to tell Jim, the film is done, Jim.
Did Karma and my dog make it into it, the final cut?
Karma and Mojo and Clyde.
Clyde all made it.
I believe so. I know Clyde's in there.
All right.
And Mojo too.
Okay.
Clyde and Mojo. Now Chai, of course, wasn't even around then. But yeah,
well,
they're
good.
in there. Yeah.
So we're talking about this like everybody knows what it is, and what is this?
Okay, this is a still from this film festival I was just in Los Angeles. It was called the Awareness Film Festival, and it was films from people around the world that made films that tackled social, environmental, political, and in my case, animal rights issues. In other words, they were films with a conscience, or, you know, that the purpose of the film was to raise awareness. Mm-hmm. So there was quite a few really excellent films.
Are these some of the producers here?
No, these are friends.
Oh,
That's
okay.
Matt. Remember Matt Roselle?
Oh, on the second from the left.
Yeah.
Matt's been on this program. He's what people call the Monkey Man.
That's right.
He brought all that footage out of the OHSU.
Right, the primate lab.
The primate torture lab.
Yeah, Matt is one of the people that inspired me to actually start working on this film, based on the information that he had about those monkeys, actually, and about the elephants too.
Mm-hmm. And I could see why a person would want to get involved in any one particular animal, and with you, it wasn't primates, it was elephants.
Right, that was kind of the instigation for the whole thing, because, you know, I really, up until that point, didn't really know anything about elephants in zoos. I didn't think about it, I never went to the zoo. And so when I went there and I saw what their life was like, I was shocked. I was really shocked. I had no idea that our society would allow this to continue, and that we in fact promote it and make money off of it, and tell children that it's good for them, and tell the public that it's about conservation, when these animals are basically just incarcerated. What I say, it's conservation in a zoo is really just incarceration.
Just like jail is not a rehabilitation.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work out that way. Well, that brings up pretty much the whole theme, or what the documentary was all about. Was basically, it was kind of like your journey from a sensitive human being that becomes sensitive to the plight of animals,
right,
and how they're treated in this country. As how did I write it on the PDX site? Entertainment. Was it entertainment, medical testing, and what was the third one that we used? Oh yeah, vanity.
Right.
Those three are for some reason it's okay to torture animals as long as we're doing it for one of those three, and maybe more. I don't know.
Well, food is another one, and fashion is another one.
Fashion's a vanity part, but yeah.
But Yeah.
I should have mentioned food, of course.
The thing that I tried to bring out in my film is the psychological damage to animals from being confined, or most of them, for many, many years. Farm animals don't live that long, but they still have no natural life. But I mean, I just never realized until I saw the elephants that all these animals are confined. And we don't even think about what their lives are really like, you know, once the people go home at night.
Mm-hmm.
They're still stuck there. And they have basically, especially an elephant, they have no room at all to move.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I just think that's something as a society we should start looking at from the perspective of the animal instead of from our perspective, which is just, well, we feel we need to see these animals. You know, and I understand where that viewpoint comes from. I happened to see an elephant really up close at the LA Zoo, closer than I've ever been to an elephant. And I thought, wow, this is something to see that. But then when I stayed for about an hour and I watched Billy, is the name of this elephant, pacing and bobbing his head repetitively, I thought, you know, regardless of what I got out of it, he's actually suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to start and looking at that. And that was what I discovered for myself, is this is what we're doing.
And that's somewhat what the title's about.
Yeah, it's really about my journey from not understanding the suffering and not even caring about the suffering to awareness, to the point where now I do advocate for animals. I was totally, I was not an animal rights advocate. You know, I didn't really think about animals. You know, I had cats and dogs, but beyond that, I never thought about them. So it was really a wake-up call for me. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to share what I saw and see if anyone else would, you know, resonate with that message.
Sure. Well, I think the first place to resonate, you use the word psychological damage, emotional damage. I think that would be a good place to start, because most people don't even acknowledge or understand, not because they're callous, but just because we aren't programmed, or we ain't trained or whatever in this society to understand that animals have a psychological and emotional life.
Right.
Unless you have what we call a pet or a companion, however you want to phrase it, being PC about it, you don't really realize it. And, of course, we're talking about, you know, the higher forms of animals. You know, I don't know if you can get an emotional life out of an iguana. I imagine they have some level of it.
They probably do.
They
you know,
probably do, but
the thing about animal cognition is they're learning more and more all the time. Crows are very intelligent.
extremely smarter than we are, I think.
Pigs are very intelligent, and of course,
even.
chickens are very intelligent. So it's a matter of learning and taking off the blinders, or the perceptual blinders, I would say, so that you think outside of your human box. And it's amazing what people are learning. I interviewed a fellow on our radio program. I co-host a radio program called Voices for the Animals on KBOO Portland.
90.7.
90.7. And I interviewed this fellow who wrote a book called Citizen Canine.
That's
Citizen
good.
Canine.
I like that.
And he actually discovered that dogs are much smarter than we thought, too. Even in some cases, smarter than chimps.
I've seen stuff on
So
LPB about that.
that was really shocking to me, or at least opened my eyes, you know. So, I mean, I think all these things are just now becoming more in the public consciousness.
Sure.
And more of it's coming out. But it takes, what my film says Satori, to Satori, because Satori means in Zen, sudden enlightenment. And that literally is what happened to me. I suddenly had a light bulb go off, and I recognized from the perspective of the animal, which I hadn't done before. So what does it take to get others to have that same Satori experience? You know, I don't know the answer to that, but I think the more you can put out information or visuals or films or programs like yourself, people have the opportunity to at least see it and change their minds and change their hearts.
I think this is a good point to play your trailer. You say it's a couple-minute trailer?
Yes,
And well, we'll just follow up and play that trailer and be back in a couple minutes. My might take a couple of minutes.
Well, it's coming any
I
minute
kind
now.
of sprung it on them pretty quick.
Yeah,
so-
you didn't give the control room
But I
time
thought
to.
they were pretty much time. Well, they can bring that up, but this is a 2-minute trailer taken from pieces.
It's taken from the film, right? It just gives you a glimpse of what the film covers, you know.
I get so many people that are upset when they see an animal by itself, because we're people. We imagine if we were by ourselves, we'd be unhappy. A bull elephant to be by itself is no big deal.
It used to be, except for my dogs and cats, I didn't think much about the feelings or suffering of animals. Animals are so different from us that I just didn't see the connection.
If you were to take your child, put him in a closet with a concrete floor, and put the best food money could buy in every day, would you think your child has good care?
So the other one's about 4 minutes. It's a rally up at the zoo, just from April. Have you ever seen inside a factory farm?
That's an ongoing dilemma for people like myself who believe that animals have rights, but I do eat meat.
The challenge lies with looking at suffering from the perspective of the person or individual suffering.
Milk, I thought, was a harmless product. After all, no animals died to make it.
Here comes big old Roy.
Oh, hi, Roy.
He's a Holstein steer from a dairy industry and taken away shortly after birth, of course, and then, probably taken to an auction or something like that. He actually had a slaughter date for 3 days after that.
Sometimes it seems like the mind is the hardest thing to change. For me, it wasn't so much a change of mind as a change of heart. And after years of uncovering the truth about animal suffering, it happened in an instant.
Full feature documentary.
That's right.
How long?
It's about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes.
That's a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And I guess we should, before we get too far down, we haven't even mentioned the fact that there's a showing of it coming
Right.
this Sunday.
That's right. It's this Sunday at 7 p.m. at the Mission Theater, which is on Northwest Gleason at 16th. And it starts at 7, but the doors are open at 6. So we welcome people to come in because this is actually a benefit for Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants. Well, this gives you the time and everything. The movie, that's the key art for the movie. And there will be a question and answer right after the film. And it's a really nice setting. I don't know if you've been to the Mission Theater.
It's been a long time.
But it's a
real
really
relaxed, casual.
Very relaxed and casual. They have a lot of delicious veggie choices for food. They have a lot of brews, like, what do you call them? Beers, okay,
brews, yeah.
Handcrafted beers that people love here in Portland.
Yeah.
And popcorn, of course, and all that. So, and we'll have a table set up to give out information about Free the Oregon Zoo Elephant. So this film is a benefit showing for that organization.
What was the name of the organization?
Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants.
And is that the name of the website also?
FreeOregonZooElephants.org. Yeah. And that's our logo.
And if people would print that, type that into your Google, that would probably
It would come right up. Yeah.
Free the Oregon.
As long as we haven't been hacked this week, that is.
Yeah, does that happen?
Yeah.
Well, if you do good work and you get hacked, that means you're being successful. I guess that is just one of the.
I hope there's a good reason for it.
That's one of the barometers. Well, getting back, we were talking about I was saying that maybe not an iguana, but of course, there's a level of emotional response to being alive into your environment in anything, whether it's an amoeba or whatever. They're going to pull back from something that's painful. That's a response. There is an emotional response that they want to take care of themselves. And we talk about intelligence, but does intelligence necessarily mean they have an emotional life? And I think that's something that people haven't thought past that. Excuse me. People know that a dog a crow or whatever has intelligence, especially, your dogs and your cats and your
Well-
horses. But then I don't know if people take it any further than that to realize that they have an emotional life, that they can suffer in that cage.
Yeah, I guess at one point I was maybe in that camp too. I didn't know, but for me, all it took was watching. I mean, it's just like you watch your dog, or your cat. You can see their emotional life. It's pretty clear.
Sure.
They exhibit empathy. I mean, you don't have an emotional life if you exhibit empathy. So there's been so many examples, for instance, of elephants rescuing other elephants, rescuing other species, rescuing even humans. There's been examples of dogs who actually went into the middle of a freeway to rescue another dog
Sure.
and pull him to safety. Now, what is that? I mean, it's just at some point, because they don't have the same language, people will just maybe just discount them. But really, anybody who spends any time watching an animal and spending any time figuring out what their communication means, because they're all communicating. I think it was Mark Twain who said that man just didn't understand animals because he wasn't paying attention or wasn't, he was too dumb to understand them. Mark Twain, he has a really clever way of saying it.
Right.
But anyway, this is a fellow from the film. His name is Dr. Ray Greek, and he was an animal researcher himself for many years. And then he realized after a number of years that animal research was not creating realistic or accurate results. So strictly from the scientific point of view, he decided to create an organization which would target that with the public and say, look, this is not working. We need to stop funding animal research and start funding, in his case, what he believes genetic research, genome research. And so he's come out, Americans for Medical Advancement, I think is the name of his organization. But anyway, so he's just one of the people that I interviewed in the film. He's down near Santa Barbara. And so I just wanted to approach the vivisection issue, not just from the emotional side, which is, people when they see animals in a cage or being experimented on, which Matt pointed out in his videos. The other side of it is how accurate is the science? And there's two doctors that I interviewed in the film who claim, from their perspective, it's totally unscientific.
Well, how accurate and how applicable.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to humans. You can't translate one species across to human. So it's a failed science, and yet it's being funded, billions of dollars every year by the NIH.
That's exactly my point was going to bring up, that a lot of this is just to get the funding.
Right.
They
exactly.
They
get the funding.
They get the funding.
Now, if you want to bring that picture back, this is Packy. Packy is the oldest elephant at the Oregon Zoo. He was born there in 1962, and about a year and a half or so ago, Packy contracted TB. So right now, Packy is in isolation and quarantine at the Oregon Zoo, being fed a regimen of TB drugs. And the problem with the drugs is Packy gets really sick on the drugs and loses weight. And so they have to keep taking him off the drugs and letting him gain back weight and then putting him back on the drugs.
So the tuberculosis rises again.
And every time they put him back on, he has to start the whole regimen all over again. So Packy has not been in the public eye for at least a year now. He used to have, every year there would be a birthday party for Packy, and kids and parents would just, have hordes of people come in to see him. They sold lots of elephant ears But anyway, now Packy is really sick, and that's one of the problems with keeping elephants in a zoo, is they contract a lot of illnesses that they would normally never get.
In the wild.
In the wild, yeah.
Well, that makes sense. You mentioned the word kids, and that brings up a point that always needs to be made, is when some people say, well, maybe circuses aren't very good, but people, especially kids, need to see these animals. And these days it seems to me with the internet, they can see these animals, maybe not face to face, but being on the other side of it seemed like a bars would be no different than being on the other side of a monitor screen. So they're really able to see these animals.
And not only that, they're seeing them in a natural setting where they behave naturally.
Good point.
They actually learn something. You're really not going to learn anything from a stressed out, bored, depressed, and chronically ill animal. I mean, they're not going to behave naturally at all. So it's cruel to the animal, and it's really not teaching the children what animals are really like. What I always say is, most people in this country, no matter what their income level, will go at some point to Disneyland. That's like some kind of iconic experience for everybody.
I did it when I was younger, but
well, but I mean, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Every family in this country feels they've got to get to Disneyland.
Yep.
So now they're going to save their money, and they're going to go. All right. My comment to that is, why not save your money and go to the wildlife safari, wherever that is? It would be great if they had more wildlife refuges around the country for people to go to. Or let's say if their dream is to see an elephant, save every penny you have for 10 years or whatever, and go to Asia or go to Africa and see them, if that's really your dream. So make it an adventure and make it something that is very precious and valuable. And then you're going to really, really value that animal. Instead of just going to a zoo where you're going to go and get something to eat or drink and forget all about him after 10 minutes, which is really what happens.
Well, they could also, maybe if they can save up their money and they really can't save up enough to go over there, maybe they could donate that to some organization that's trying to keep people from poisoning them and shooting them for their tusks.
That's right.
There's that way to see an elephant, is to see them into the future.
Right. Exactly. And you can even go, save up your money. It takes a little bit of money, but not a lot. And there's tours of the Paws Sanctuary in Northern California, which is the Performing Animal Welfare Society. And they have big cats, they've got elephants. And you can go on a tour there and see the elephants.
Now, this is in a natural setting?
Yes.
Were you in a car or something? Or
no, you get out, you take a tour around the property. And so that's one other option.
They're behind
they're behind fences, but it's like you're not, in a room somewhere watching a TV screen. You're actually out in the field getting as close as you can to them, So, I'm just saying that there are other options for people to see wildlife. And we need to develop those. That would be the best way to really have children and adults have a bonding experience with wildlife. And then I think they would really appreciate it.
I appreciate that word bonding, because I've been thinking every time I hear this phrase, Black Lives Matter, or all lives matter. Well, yeah, all lives matter, but let's get away from the anthropomorphic perception of this and just look at human beings. All lives do matter, and yeah, you could say, well, a human being is worth more than a grasshopper, and we could argue that point, I suppose. But all lives do matter, and I think that might be something that people could bond to, that concept, and not reject it just out of hand. And think about that. Anytime anybody says Black Lives Matter or all lives matter, and just think about that. We're talking about life. We're talking about the biosphere of the planet. We're talking about the biodiversity of the planet as well. We want to get off into the perception of the all species matter. It's an important point, and it goes beyond maybe the scope of what we're talking about here tonight. But what we're talking about here tonight is a place that Courtney has been to and through, and she has shown in her documentary that you don't have to become a vegan in order to understand that there's more to animals than just something that we can use for our vanity or for our food or for our entertainment.
I think that is a very good, excellent point, that all lives matter. And I think it does tie in to this extent. I remember when I used to live in the South, for instance, okay? I lived in Memphis. The only black people I ever saw were the maids. Literally.
It gives you kind of a slant on that.
That's how I perceived black people. They were maids. Okay, then many years later, I moved to Los Angeles, I moved to San Francisco, I moved to New York City. Suddenly, I knew and became friends with many people from many different cultures and races. And I said, oh my God. And I had a wonderful experience learning all these different ways and cultures, and it just opened up my whole perception. And then I saw people are people. I mean, that's a theory, but when you actually have friends that are, from a different race, for instance, you actually see it. You don't think it through. It's not a theory. You actually experience it. Those are your friends, and after a while, you don't see color. I mean, literally, that's what happened to me. You see a person and their personality, not their exterior. It's just a whole different way of seeing things. So that, I think, is true the same with animals, because we have so limited experience, especially oftentimes living in the city and in our mechanized world. Now, this fellow who wrote Citizen Canine pointed that out, that the service that companion animals in particular do is to connect people to nature, to the wild side of life,
And to
their own
themselves.
wild
Yeah,
side.
right.
Because they're so mechanized into computers and a lot of times living lonely, isolated lives, that the animal helps bring them back to that connection to the earth, to nature, and to all life. So yes, all lives matter.
It's not introducing something new to them. It's introducing them to something that was always there underneath.
Right, it reawakens it. It's like we're cut off from it a lot of times. Like if you're on your computer all day and your dog comes up to you and wants a walk, he's going to make sure you get that walk, right? And so that's a way to get you reconnected and disconnected from your computerized world. And I think more and more that's important, don't you?
I think so. It started out maybe that we were all compartmentalized with our cars, and then our computers, and then our TVs, and then our computers, and now our phones.
Right. We're just tuned in all the time, and it's a way. Animals are helping us to tune into a different frequency, you could say. Or something that's really going to help preserve our Earth. You have to be in touch with it if you want to preserve it.
Yeah, maybe all lives do matter more than we think.
Absolutely.
All right.
They matter to our life, really.
So we're about halfway through the program. You brought a little 4-minute clip, I believe?
Yeah.
We'll give them a second
I
to
want to
get
give
that
Frank
one.
Mahoney credit. Frank did the camera work on this. He did
All
a great
right.
job. And this was a protest last year at Packy's birthday. This time they came too quick.
Free Packy! Free Packy! Free Packy! Free Packy! Free Packy! Free Packy!
Well, Packy is not here, and it's Packy's birthday, and usually they have the big celebration and the big birthday cake. I think Packy's about 53 years old, but Packy is too ill to be on display, so that's why the sign. Where is Packy? Packy's a big fundraiser for the Oregon Zoo, as all the elephants are. So, but they don't belong in zoos; they belong in their natural habitat. We want our freedom.
I'm here because I want to support the animals in Packy today, and because zoos are very abusive to their animals, and they deserve to be in wildlife habitats and be able to be with actual family and not be able to to stand and do nothing all day. I think they deserve bigger habitats and bigger wildlife zones, and that they all think too. I mean, they're living, thinking beings. So caging a living, thinking being, it's like caging a human, and people wouldn't do that now, would they?
Anyone who thinks it's okay to keep elephants in cages, I recommend that you read the book The Elephant Whisperer. It's a story about a game reserve in South Africa and the bond that the head of the reserve made with two herds of elephants, wild elephants, previously wild elephants. Elephants are just as capable of love as dogs and cats. They're just as intelligent, if not more so, than dogs and cats. They live in communities. They take care of each other.
I'm a law student at Lewis and Clark Law School, and I'm here because I believe that elephants should not be held in captivity for the amusement of others.
When you go and see their exhibits, you can tell by the bobbing of their heads, they're distressed. This behavior shows they're stressed.
I've seen the elephants at this zoo, at the Oregon Zoo, and you can just tell by looking at them that they're stressed out, not happy, and I believe that they should be released to a sanctuary.
As often is the case, the so-called improvements to zoo exhibits are for the benefit of the visitors of the zoo, to the zoo. They might put in some pretty plants or a water feature or something like that, but are often totally or only very indirectly related to fulfilling the true needs of the animals that are on exhibit.
Zoos, basically because they don't give enough space to the elephants to walk. Elephants need a lot of room to walk and roam. They develop foot disease and foot rot from not moving, not being mobile. Elephants need 10 to 30 miles to roam a day to forage for food, and they do not get that inside of zoos. Zoos are basically like penitentiaries for other species, and I mean, they'll never be able to live their lives as full herds. A lot of the elephants here are born here and they'll die here.
Free packing! Free packing! Free packing! Free packing!
All right. Oop, there we go. Well, we're back.
I get
and
so many people that are upset when they see an animal by itself.
I think that
They accidentally turned on the trailer.
It got onto a loop there or something.
okay.
Oh, the trailer, yeah. Well, they caught that, and this is a good time to mention the showing Sunday again.
Right. It's this Sunday, November 1st at 7 o'clock at the Mission Theater. The doors open at 6. It is a donation, but no one is turned away for lack of funds. We just want you to come and see it. And it's a really cozy, intimate setting at the Mission Theater there. Lots of good food and drinks. So come on down. We'll have a Q&A right after the film, and we'll have a table with all kinds of information about Free the Oregon Zoo elephants. And DVDs for sale, too. I guess I should mention that.
Mm-hmm. So this is for the Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants
right.
organization.
It's a benefit for them, right.
Right. All right. You're talking about your personal odyssey, your personal transition. Mine wasn't quite so dramatic, but it was just more slowly. I didn't have no epiphany, but it was just slowly. I never really had animals growing up. I'm almost 69 now, and probably 23 years ago, I got a dog because people were breaking into the house and in the neighborhood, and I got a big he wasn't 120 pounds then, but he was a Rottweiler Lab, and he got pretty big, and he scared the hell out of people, which is kind of what I wanted, but he was just a big baby. He was just, I named him Percy, which drove people crazy, a big dog like that.
Percy.
But
what's a sissy name?
Yeah,
what do you mean?
that's kind of why I named it that way. Just the opposite of how he was. He had a head this big and a big chest and a Rottweiler and all that.
He probably did protect your house.
Oh, he did. People didn't come. He scared people off, as a matter of fact. But I know with that dog, I realized that. I'd raise my voice and he'd cower. I'd realize, oh man, these are sensitive animals. They're not. I can't think of the word. Animal isn't the right word. Organism doesn't get it. They're sentient beings that have an emotional life, and that has to be taken into consideration in our relationships and our behavior with them.
I think so. I think by doing that, it brings out our own humanity, and so it's and also, from my experience, just being around animals is a healing experience. I know if you've probably experienced this. If you ever feel kind of down, your dog will come over and kind of try and cuddle next to you.
Sure.
They're responding to your emotional vibration.
If you're in pain, yeah.
So I think it's not just in the therapeutic setting, and animals are, of course, used in many therapeutic settings, old folks' homes, for autistic children, just a variety of ways that animals can help to heal people. But I think even without that, just a normal person, you experience a healing experience, a healing relationship.
I see we have a phone call. I didn't realize the number was up there. They snuck that in on me.
Okay.
All right, first caller, you're on the air. First caller. Sometimes the first caller is a little bumpy, so hopefully it'll get through. First caller, you have a comment or a question?
My name's Chuck Faywick, and I am calling to ask this question. With so many elephants being killed in the wild, aren't they better off in the zoo, or a good zoo anyway, somewhere? rather than being the object of target practice. What's so bad about life in a zoo, anyway?
Okay,
All
well,
right,
thank
well,
you for your question,
that's a good
Chuck.
question.
I know many people have that question. Okay, the one thing I would suggest to you, if you haven't, is to go to the zoo and see the elephants. That's what I did. And when you do that, I think you'll see the answer will probably come to you without me giving it to you. But what you see, what Dame Daphne Sheldrick says, by the way, Dame Daphne Sheldrick rescues baby elephants in Kenya, is that when you're seeing an elephant, what you see in a zoo is not an elephant. What you're seeing is a tragedy. And I'll explain that a little bit. Elephants are built to walk. They have to walk for their mental and physical health. It's just a given. Many of them are 5 to 7 tons. In the wild, they can walk up to 30 miles a day. Even the zoo will admit they need to walk 2 miles a day. And there's nowhere near 2 miles of space in any zoo. At the Oregon Zoo, they have a new exhibit which is 6 acres. About 4 of that is walking space for the elephants. There's 7 elephants, and quickly elephants, who are one of the most intelligent animals on earth, recognize what is at the other end of that space. And I've seen Billy do this in Los Angeles. He has about 1 or 2 acres to himself, and he'll walk across that 2 acres and stand and bob his head for the rest of the day. It's just not an adequate space for an animal that big and that intelligent and that social. The other problem for animals, and elephants in zoos in particular, is they develop so many zoonotic diseases. Their feet suffer tremendously from the hard surfaces and even from sand, which can get into their bodies and cause all kinds of blockage and even death. So there is really no natural substrate that they can use in a zoo. They need grass to walk on. They need trees to forage on. And of course, they can't have that in a zoo. The elephants would chew it up within a matter of days. So it's just not feasible to provide adequate habitats for elephants in zoos. Your point about the conservation, the fact is more animals that are born in zoos die than are born there. They cannot keep up with the death rate. I recommend a very excellent series called Glamour Beasts that ran in the Seattle Times in 2012. You can see it online. This fellow, Michael Behrens, did intensive research about breeding of elephants in zoos, and he found out that the death rate, the birth rate can nowhere keep up with the death rate. So they're not really conserving elephants. What needs to be done in the wild, I would say, is all the money that they're spending right now to take care of elephants in zoos, and that's a tremendous amount, by the way, should be funneled some way back to anti-poaching, back to developing better connections between human and wildlife in these areas when they're both at risk, back to creating true safari experiences. There are some in Africa which are profitable, which do preserve wildlife. It's a very big problem, there's no doubt about it, but I think the money should be refocused back to true conservation, where animals truly live, not in a zoo environment where they truly die, slowly and painfully.
Before we get to the next phone call, a couple of things struck me is that if all the animals, all the elephants were killed off or whatever, and they were left in zoos, and they weren't in the wild, wouldn't be long, and those would no longer be elephants, because they wouldn't have a social life, and
Right.
And with the death rate, they would die off.
That's right.
And so, you know, that it might, I could see how that could be a point where you could be saving them. What was it? Chuck had the feeling for the animals, at least to conserve the animals as a species. But in the long run, that wouldn't work.
No, it's not really realistic, and it's also very inhumane. And that, all I can tell you is that that's my experience, and I encourage everyone to go there and to see for yourself. And to stay there for a while, though. Stay and watch for about 20 minutes and see what you see. I went many times to the zoo, and I can tell you what I saw there did not convince me that they should belong there. Let's put it that way.
Put it that way. I think we have another caller. Next caller. Next caller, you're on the air if you're still there. Whoa, whoa, there we go. Are you still there? Apparently they're not still there. All right. Well, we'll move along here.
Okay.
A couple things here. So you mentioned how animals.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. You're on the air.
Oh, okay. I'm watching the TV, but it doesn't sound like he's picking up on me.
Yeah, we can hear you now. So.
Oh, okay.
Make sure your TV's turned down, please.
Yeah. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Here's my question. I thought I read quite a while ago that the zoo was going to use bond money. I thought I read quite a while ago that the zoo was going to use bond money to build a special place to retire Packy and some of the other old elephants, but I haven't heard anything for quite a while. Do you happen to know what's happening with that?
Yes, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. Yes, in 2008, the voters here in Portland voted for a $125 million bond measure, and part of that was promoted as being for an off-site preserve, a retirement home for the zoo's, at that time, well, 8 elephants. Okay, it was 8 elephants. And what happened since then is documents came out of Metro, through Willamette Week actually first reported about it, that the vision for this preserve was not a retirement home, it was to be a breeding ground. And so it was nothing like what voters voted for. And not only that, there really wasn't any money that was being used to develop the preserve. They did some studies. They did option land in Sandy, Roslyn Lake. Mm-hmm. And however, nothing has come of it. That was in 2008 when the bond measure passed. Now it's 2015 and there's been no progress made on that preserve whatsoever. They have recently, the zoo and Metro have recently appointed an independent review committee to assess the feasibility of this preserve, whether, and they don't call it a preserve now, they call it a remote elephant center. And as we know, what that means is a breeding facility. So unfortunately, at FOS, for instance, we no longer support that because it is not what it was intended to be. Mm-hmm. And it is not even being created. So I don't know what the future of it is, but unless they change the vision to being a retirement home, it's really no paradise for the elephants.
There already is paradise for the elephant if we just leave them the hell alone. It seems to me. You know, when you were talking about it, I've noticed this on television. There's a program about they're using horses, I think, to help prisoners, and they also do the pit bulls and the prisoners.
Yes.
And you mentioned, I think the words where you quoted, they bring out our humanity.
Right.
Well, if our relationship with animals and a somewhat of a even relationship where we are no lording over them, we are on an equal footing with them, and it brings out our humanity. What does the way we treat them now bring out? What does it show about our humanity if it could, the way we treat them now? If that brings out our humanity, what can we say about our humanity when we treat them the way we do for vanity and for the entertainment and all that?
I'd say it brings out our inhumanity.
That's right. It seems like it to me. And then sometimes if you can reverse things from a perspective, you can see a lot more in the juxtaposition of that. And it just seemed to me that was very telling. That is so important for these prisoners, or whoever it is that is in a relationship with the dogs or the horses. That shows how important the emotional life of each one is, and how they can be used to help one another out. PTSD with soldiers too.
Oh, absolutely.
I just realized that's probably the most prevalent one, because there's so many soldiers that have that injury.
Absolutely, and in fact, there's some animals that have PTSD, and that's a good way for both of them to heal. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of animals actually have been to war, and so they are suffering too from PTSD. And I've seen a program where some organization puts them together, and they do heal each other.
Both being with that same affliction rather than one not having it and one.
Right.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
I think that's a wonderful program, and I just want to mention in my film there's a short section about pit bulls. You had mentioned a Rottweiler. I think Rottweilers, pit bulls in particular, have kind of a bad reputation. And when we talk about all these animals that are treated badly and discarded and have stereotypical ideas. Well, I think the pit bull is kind of the quintessential.
It is.
Animal for that. And the fact is, there's so many really sweet pit bulls, and they just need love, and they just need good training, the same as any dog. And so I just think that that reminded me that that is an animal who could really use a different perceptual understanding.
Well, that just exactly proves, talks about our point, because human beings can get aberrant behavior through how they are brought up, if they're mistreated, or even to be ignored is worse than being mistreated. That's the worst kind of mistreatment. And you lock dogs up and don't let them run out or run around, or you tie them up in your yard in the rain, or even in a dog house, or you treat them badly by beating on them. They're going to develop some serious issues, and people do too.
Absolutely.
So that shows that there's some kind of similar emotional life involved there.
You know, and what always strikes me too is if you go to a shelter, and it may just be because they have no other options for the way they design these shelters, but they look like prisons. And it's very disturbing. And I think if people have any questions about whether these animals have emotional lives, all they have to do is go to a shelter and see, because a lot of them are acting out from depression. A lot of them will cower in their cage when they're dropped off by their family, for instance. They may not eat for a while. So all of those are emotional reactions. So if you want to see that or get a better understanding of an emotional life of an animal, it's pretty easy to do.
I see we're down to 10 minutes. I was thinking of actually playing a little video, but there's plenty to talk about here. But I just wanted to make sure that I brought that point up again about the what's going on downtown on Wednesday. So we'll make sure to make another announcement about that city commissioners meeting on Wednesday, having to do with the resolution against oil and coal trains. But I don't want to really play the video, because this conversation is going a lot of good directions. We have a couple good phone calls. We have the lineup. We encourage people to call up, ask questions, make comments. You might think like Chuck thought, that maybe there's a good usage of use for, I should say, circuses and the what we're talking about with the zoos. Maybe in some alternate universe there might be, but not in this one apparently. And that brings up the point that Save Our Oregon Elephants is the name of the organization.
Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants.
Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants, and that's the name of the organization that the benefit is going on this coming Sunday. You might talk a little about that.
Just to point out, what the goal of Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants is twofold. The first one is to find a home to free Packy to a sanctuary. That's our goal. That's been that way all along. We haven't stopped that. The other one, though, that's equally important, is we want to stop the breeding of elephants in the zoo. We would like to start with the Oregon Zoo and ultimately stop the breeding of elephants in all zoos everywhere. Because what happens, these elephants are continually bred and shipped around from one zoo to another, or even sometimes sold to circuses. So it's just not a good life. They're never going to have a good life, and they're never going to return to the wild. So you're just breeding them in captivity. So that is our mission, is to first free Packy, because he's 53 years old and this is pretty much his last chance. We've been working on it for 7 years, so we haven't given up. But I just encourage people to, if you care at all about Packy, to contact the zoo in Metro and tell them to please allow Packy to be released to a sanctuary. And then become aware of this breeding issue and why it needs to stop. I mean, you can educate yourself very clearly on that on our website, and also at this article that I mentioned, which is Glamour Beasts, which is available online.
I was struck by partly with the caller, Chuck, and you say the death rate is nowhere. I mean, the birth rate it can't keep up with the death rate.
Right.
And so it seems to me that unless they're bringing in more elephants from the wild, then they're just basically raising hatchery elephants.
Exactly right. Well, we call it a puppy mill. It's a puppy mill for elephants.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just pop them out. And for instance, baby Lily here at the Oregon Zoo was born in 2012. The zoo was going to sell her to or trade her back to Half Trunk Will Travel, which is an elephant training organization. They train elephants, and basically they beat elephants into submission, and they therefore get them compliant to be do tricks and so forth for television, for movies, for circuses. And so Lily that was going to be her fate. Well, the Seattle Times came out and revealed this, and there was a big story all of a sudden, and Portlanders stood up and said, no, we're not going to have that. And the zoo director had to backtrack and renegotiate that contract for Lily and for her dad, Tusco, because both of them were going to be sent back to Half Trunk Will Travel.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, we don't know what the contract is for the future for Half Trunk Will Travel. Supposedly, they have access to every other baby that's born there.
So they break up families.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like it's not even
they
like
think
it's not
nothing of
important.
that. And I think that's an irony, because the zoo is very fond of saying that it's all about families.
Human families.
Well, they
yeah.
they claim it's for elephant families, but I
okay.
think, yeah, you just poke a little tiny hole in that logic and you see it falls apart. But I want to say that, you know, in Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants, which I admit I'm a member of this organization, we are not after targeting zoos. We just want the zoo to understand that retiring the elephants and eventually closing down their elephant exhibit, because it's simply cruel and inhumane, we will support them for that. There's been other zoos around the country and around the world that have closed their elephant exhibits, and we think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to give encouragement to those zoos who do that, because it's a big issue to tackle the zoo and the zoo industry. So we want to start with that. That would be a big progress step right there. The Detroit Zoo has closed their elephant exhibit, the San Francisco Zoo, the Chicago Zoo, the UK zoos. I mean, this is the direction that we would love to see zoos go in.
Mm-hmm. We're down to a little over 3 minutes. I was going to have you bring up three of those pictures.
Oh yeah.
We don't have a lot of time left.
We
but
can
some
talk
of the
about a few of the other issues that are in the film besides the elephants
right, yeah,
by doing that.
We can
Sure,
maybe bring
go
up
ahead.
some of those pictures real briefly here. They're actually right from your movie, right?
They are stills from the film.
Right.
Okay, this is Brooks Fahey. He's started an organization called Predator Defense. And what he does now is he's focusing on wolves. He just did a film called Exposing Wild, I forget the exact title, sorry, but it's exposing wildlife services and what they're doing to wolves in particular. They're trapping them, they're poisoning them, and they're basically endangering not only the wolves, but a lot of non-target animals who are poisoned and trapped.
Oh, yeah.
And Wildlife Services is just kind of Peter DeFazio said they're kind of a rampant agency that no one is watching over them, a renegade agency.
Yeah.
And I think that's what his film points out, and that's what Brooks is all about.
Okay.
And so he's one of the people, and one of the issues I cover in the film is what's happening to these predators, you know, the coyotes, the wolves, the lynx, the bobcat. Okay, went a little too fast past that one, but this is here. Okay, that one is from Out to Pasture Sanctuary. I'll give them a little promo here.
They do. They deserve it. They do good
yeah,
work.
they do. This is one of their goats, and they have been rescuing animals for many years. Farm animals, horses, dogs, cats. They have a whole menagerie of animals that they've rescued. So I wanted to go there and see them and have people understand that this is something that they could support right here in our community. It's in Estacada.
Okay, we probably have time for one more.
This is Roy. Roy is a rescue steer at Lighthouse Farm Sanctuary down in Skyo near Salem. Roy was a dairy cow. Well, he wasn't a cow, he was a steer. He was born in a dairy, and of course he was going to be slaughtered because they can't have males in dairies. And he got rescued, and this is his life now at Lighthouse Farm Sanctuary.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it gives us a little over a minute. You might mention one more last time.
Okay, let's show our page. Yeah, it's going to be at the Mission Theater this Sunday at November 1st at 7 p.m. And it's a Portland premiere of my film From Suffering to Satori. Doors open at 6, film starts at 7. followed by Q&A, and all kinds of delicious treats, beers. It's a cozy, wonderful
For
setting,
sale
so
there,
come
though.
and join us.
You're not providing those.
No, we're not. Those are for sale. Sorry.
Right.
I guess I would get a lot more people coming to the film.
Free eats. Yeah. Portland loves free eats. Or any
But the
kind.
Mission Theater, I should point out, was kind enough to donate the theater for this. So I just want to point that out.
They should have a plug for that.
So they need a little plug to sell their wares that night.
All right. Well, Courtney, thanks for coming on the
Thank you
program.
for having me, Jim.
All
this
right.
has been an odyssey. 7 years.
Yeah, it has been.